I want to welcome everybody to our third session, morning session, which will last from now until around noon. After that, we will break for lunch and then go into the final session. This session is known as Perspectives, Challenges for Change. We have 4 speakers for you this morning, 4 very different perspectives. A quick reminder of the rules. Each speaker will speak for around 40 minutes. We'll allow about 10 minutes for questions and answers. Of course, we will be flexible. I should note, and this is rather important, new to those of you who are from out of state, that we want to please ensure that all concealed weapons have their safety locks on. This is Colorado. In case you didn't know it, the community colleges, as of last week, now allow students to carry concealed weapons. And the University of Colorado is trying to stop that at the university, but the courts probably won't allow it to. The debates, of course, could get a little heated, and I should also note that once upon a time, I was a Chicago wire service homicide reporter, and I am therefore very sensitive to the correlation between guns, safety locks, and good health. Anyway, once again, we're going to go until about 12 noon and then break for lunch. So without any further ado, I'm going to present our first speaker. And as I said, we have 4. Our first speaker is Scott Danielson. Scott is Chief Experience Architect at Couture, an international strategic innovation and experience design firm. Couture is a new media company focused on leveraging cutting-edge social media and emerging technologies to develop new forms of disruptive business models that create economic value. In other words, it's about change, folks. Pure and simple. That's what Scott's about. Scott is going to educate us this morning on the patient experience, something that we really haven't talked about very much this morning, although alluded to in the discussions, and how a deeper understanding of that experience can help us to create a better, more effective healthcare system. Scott?
So I am here to talk about patient-centered care, the person maybe, and personalized medicine. I want to talk a little bit about how the patient's perspective, their real, very real point of view, can inform care delivery innovation. I do head up experience design for a Toronto-based innovation firm, and I'm going to just tell you a little bit about how we work, how we gather insights, how we listen, some of the tools we use, and then how we try to translate these insights into innovation. We're not always successful, but I'll tell you a little bit about how we approach this. First, a little bit of a story. I met with the chief medical officer of a big hospital group recently, and I think he told me this as some coaching, and I thought it was great. He said, Scott, patients care about 3 things, and 3 things in this specific order. First, don't hurt me. Second, don't heal me. And a distant third, be nice to me. And I will disclose to you, I don't work in the area of safety, I don't practice medicine, but I'm very, very interested to understand what being nice to me can mean to a patient, and how accomplishing this, whatever it may mean, however they interpret that, can really have a positive impact on their care if you do it well. So at Couture, we strive to translate these unmet needs and how we discover these unmet needs into rich, meaningful experiences. We don't just work in healthcare. We work across a big spectrum of user and customer experience. But there's probably no more meaningful place in society, and certainly no more place that I'm more passionate about than how these tools and this work can actually help us in the world that we're all here to learn about. We call this B School plus D School. We use really great business school, rigorous approaches, but also a very, very broad range, broadly defined design and research. And, we have a couple of resident anthropologists. We bring all kinds of resources to bear. It's a multidisciplinary approach because as we know and as we're learning, it is an incredibly complex problem, the most complex problem perhaps we'll face in all of our lifetimes, and also maybe the most noble thing that we could be working on. Certainly I believe that. So that's what I focus on, the healthcare practice at Couture. We have a toolkit. I'm not going to go through the things. They're really just basically a collection of techniques that we've developed over time from all different kinds of places, approaches. But I want to underscore it really is all about learning to listen deeply. We listen and we watch for outlier activities and particularly workarounds. Just all the different ways in which we make adaptations to overcome the things that don't work as well as they should. We try to consider every possible thing that we can, especially those counterintuitive connections and the hidden motivations that make things go in everyday life. We sometimes say we're powered by ethnography. Ethnography is really the look at people in their real settings. And there's a discipline behind it, but also I come from a filmmaker background. I'm a documentary filmmaker originally by training. And so whether anthropologist or filmmaker or human factors designer or graphic designer or physician, scientist, all of us, is looking at sort of the broader context of what are the demands on the patient's imagination, how do their fears drive them, how do their, non-compliance, very, very interesting place for this. I'll tell you a little bit about something we're working on. There is, long story short, there is a process, but I will say that it's very swirling, very nonlinear, and very messy. It's not for everybody. But it's probably very much like the inquiries of all of us as we work through the looking for solutions in healthcare. So we often start with a question. Where does healthcare happen in this case? We assume, in part, it happens here, right? But what about here? What about all the other places that healthcare happen? Is this part of the healthcare from a patient's perspective? What about this? What about sitting around the table with your buddies or the family gathered around helping to solve a specific challenge? And I don't know what the challenge is in this picture. That's what we really need to find out. It may not be the obvious. It may be something that is hidden to us at first glance. But really, what we look to do is deep listening. We're listening for the patient's voice, or really the person inside the patient. Because in one respect or another, we all participate at one point or another. Ideally not, but in reality, most of us are a patient in some way or another, or we know a patient or support a patient. How we listen, the degree to which we listen, that really, really matters to what we find. This is basically our field research. So we go into people's homes. These are actual pictures from work that we're doing. We don't just give them a survey or ask them to tell us, how's your healthcare going? We sit with them for hours, and we observe how they eat. We eat with them. We observe their sleeping quarters, their relationships. They talk to us about all kinds of things that may or may not be directly related to health care, but it does relate to their perspective, their point of view, their environment, their job status, their concerns, their body image, their transportation needs, the presence or absence of friends or community or pets, just how they live. And from this, patterns start to emerge. We start to build these into profiles, not just in healthcare, but this is done in many, many different disciplines of user experience. But from these profiles, we start to drill down into what we start to build representative from the specifics to the personas, we call them personas, highlighting specific obstacles. In this case, just the fact that you need to move from one doctor who's cared for you for a long time to another destination. And how do I deal with that? This isn't something that sort of formal healthcare top-down thinks a lot about, but it's certainly a very important piece of the patient perspective. We look for possible causes of fear, avoidance, what we like to call the things that cause us sleepless nights. We listen for motivations and barriers and drivers, the things that just make us tick. Then we start to map these things. We map them in different ways. We call these, in this case, a journey map, the highs and lows. I could show you dozens of these with all different kinds of coordinates, and some work better than others, and they don't, one style doesn't work for every project. We kind of, constantly are trying something And I'll talk about this later, but the humility of recognizing what doesn't work, no matter how clever or precious, and being willing to throw it out and try something else is really a critical piece of design and science and the process of the pursuit of truth. So we start to map these journeys, the way that people go, and we actually then translate from high-resolution photography into almost comics. We build representative comics to capture bigger and more representative patterns that we're feeling. One of the reasons we use illustration is when we go back to people and show them these things, they're not necessarily relating to that person does or doesn't look like me in a high-resolution photograph, but more about the journey and the story, and yeah, that happened to me, or no, that's not at all like it is. And we'll listen, and we'll draw it again, and we'll come back with some more drawings. We'll go around and around and around on that. In parallel to this, there's a lot of processes that we do that are parallel with different teams. We do what we call this global scanning. And we do it to dramatically expand our own perspectives on what's possible, not just in healthcare, not just in the specific thing we're addressing, like the delivery of insulin in a home environment or whatever it is. We look really broadly. We look way outside of the industry, but we look for things that can inform and inspire us, sort of the non-intuitive aspect of that. And then we start building on these maps. We start to look for structure. There's a danger in this, but not unlike making a film, in my metaphor, which is you have to start making tough choices about what's in and what isn't. If you make the wrong choices, or if you make certain choices, they take you this way. If they make another set of choices, they take you this way. So you have to be really conscious of what you build into your map. But we build these dimensional maps. We look at connections between things, sort of the rooting back to, and these things, I mean, this map in particular, it's not as tall as that screen, but it's about as wide as this blackboard, the very map you see here. And we'll roll this out and we'll build on it. We'll print it out and we'll assemble it and take it apart. But it gives us a perspective. It really is, the objective is to keep going back to the patient perspective, bottom up, or the person perspective. Then prototyping starts to occur. Prototyping, in this case, it's a dashboard, an early dashboard for a diabetic support tool. And we start to play with the pieces, and we use very, very low-tech tools, often paper, Post-it notes, things like that. We really stretch ourselves. This is a mashup, a sort of social media mashup of how inspiration can occur in a social media space to support diabetic storytelling and support and sort of the wisdom of crowds in ways in which sort of the size and the locality to the me individual here is organized, and how it can make an easy way in. A lot of this is, in my background in product design, is how to make really complicated stuff easier. Now I have to say that I am awed by the complexity of what we have to deal with and how to make that easier, but that's what we're working on every day. And then we go back, we try our ideas on real people, real patients, again and again. This is in a laboratory, but it can often go right back to the homes that I showed you before. And we watch, and we listen, and we watch, and we listen, and there's an art to that. It's probably more art than science. Just, like, why did they get stuck at this certain place? And instead of saying, God, they're stupid, can't they see it? It's right in front of their eyes. We have to really quietly observe and say, as obvious as it is to us, that big button that says press here, nobody's pressing on it. What's wrong? What are we doing wrong? So that often, it's how these people engage, and how quickly they engage, and how long they stick with something, whether it's interesting to them or not, or frustrating, or whether they start talking to each other and looking for help in a setting like this or at home. But it's that watching and learning and deep listening, and this takes a lot of time and a lot of patience. And at the end of my sentence here, I say humility, because it's really hard in making stuff, whether you're making a little film or making a little product, to not get really excited about your own idea and think that this is it. I've been working on this for 3 months. It's got to be it. And frankly, all kinds of forces are telling you internally, I'm kind of sick of this problem and I'd like it to be it so we can move on. But it's the willingness to go back and say, that is not it. There's something else we have to try. Maybe it's something with a smart card that the people carry around. Maybe there's some way that we can read data into an interface that's available to people. We build these things. We build them sometimes just out of styrofoam and with duct tape and whatever. But then we get it back and test and test and test until we think we have something, and this is just basically a plastic mock-up, until we think we have something that's really worth taking to the next level. Not necessarily to the market, but sort of working our way back into the problem over and over. So I want to tell you about at least two stories. This is an actual product in development, and in this case, we got interested in the behavior of how we consume in our culture. We looked at it as a way of consuming information, how we consume the desire for smaller and smaller bits of information. I started searching for this stuff, and I had way more material, but it was just 1 minute Mandarin and the 1 minute Bible, and I love the 1 minute apology. Because you don't want to waste a lot of time apologizing. I love that. So basically, though, it's all about tweets. We're getting smaller and smaller. Is 140 characters too much? Maybe we can get along with 40 characters, 5 characters. Like, how small can we get? So that's one dimension. How does that translate into health information? And this comes from real stories, personal stories of people of our team and stories from the field. But someone will be with their doc, whether it's for 5 minutes or 7 minutes, or if they're lucky, longer than that, and someone says, "This is what you have." And you're shocked. And what happens in that process? This is what you have to deal with. And hey, I have some more people I have to see. Here's a brochure, a pamphlet. Why don't you read this? And if you have any questions, we'll set you up, come back in a week or two. We're going to take some tests today. And, there you go. So kind of what we were thinking about, kind of what we need maybe in healthcare is sort of something like this. We saw an urgent need, and these books are great in topics that they work in, but they're accessible, they're reasonably trustworthy. Really good people put good information into them, and they're designed to be digestible. So how would this work in healthcare? Thought about that. We thought about some of the other challenges, like how much sort of the receptivity of an audience, not only with time but also ability to read and interpret information, the complexity of the things we heard yesterday. How do you take that? I'm here just trying to catch up with all of you, and I'm thinking about, but we're designing something for way down that stream. And then the things like, wow, it's the fact that where they get their information, which was pretty logically not always that reliable, they have no problem with, because it's what they get. It's where it comes from. So we started to hone in on this unmet need. And we thought about, once I leave that office with that diagnosis, and the sort of all the questions, I sit in my car, whether it's, oh, well, I'll just get that bandaged up, or I'll do this, or, oh, my God, and I might sit in my car and, tears running down my face, and do I call my spouse, or do I just sit here and feel terrible? Do I go to the library? Do I get on the internet? But that web of information that I build almost instantaneously, and this is, in a sense, the big workaround in our system. There's the doctor-patient connection. We don't really work in that space, nor should we. But all these things around there, the pharmacist, incredibly, in our research a couple of years ago, when we talked to people over and over and over again, and this is part of a whole national study, it's number of national studies, but the pharmacist comes up as this highly trusted, or sometimes most trusted, source of information. I leave that office, I have this bunch of prescriptions, and I can stand at that counter, at least in the old-fashioned model, and have a dialogue with someone who's feels a little bit more able to talk to me at my level. The nurses, the spouses, the friends, the parents, and the internet, of course. All I cobble this together in pursuit of my source of truth, or my source of calm, if I can find that. So we were looking for something bite-sized, but something that would be portable and shareable and mobile. We got really interested in ideas of cards, and how could physical cards work? Something that maybe there's a sort of a kiosk where you could assemble your cards, in the lobby of an environment or at the pharmacy. We do that with those brochures. I mean, my gosh, I watch people and you know, even if I don't have that, I might have that someday, so I'll take one of those because they're free, and they walk out of there with all this stuff. But so bite-sized pieces of cards, and physical cards, we designed a whole bunch of these cards. And then what goes on, but there's real space limitations, but there's a starting point. But the cards then would lead you to a sort of a virtual card, a world that the same card you physically have exists online, and it becomes a way in with linkages that are highly adjustable with time, with the latest information, right to the patient. You know, not through many, many, many hurdles, but right to the patient. And from this place can be a hub. And in this world, whether you believe in social media or not, it's here. So in that world, could I start to push things to people? You know, there's this world of support where everyone wants to help, and whether they bring it to you physically or they send you tons of articles. But then you have to sort through that. So there's the way that the experts and the crowds can start to vet as appropriate into a world, and I actually can assemble cards, virtual cards or physical cards, that I can start to trade and share and assemble and give to people. And people who have had this before me, people who have been down this path before me, I can actually hook onto their cards and get a collection of things that helped me and share them and go into groups online and find these things. Also, the cards can be pushed around through whatever form of media that might be available. We're really, really looking for ease of access, quality of information, and ease of sharing. So on any device you happen to have, wherever you are. We call this thing, and I'll tell you that we designed this with great excitement from the learnings we were getting in the field, not for a client, but because we also try to incubate ideas that we think are really exciting inside Idea Couture. And we got this all ready to go about 1.5 years ago, and it's been a kind of an interesting time to try to do a startup like this, particularly because it's not quantitative, you know, it's very much feely stuff. But we call it health crumbs, you know, sort of the crumbs that you might walk, or the little pathways that can be built for yourself or in front of you to get to this place of understanding and hopefully calming and receptivity to listen to the experts and listen to the people that are there to help you. We did at that time, when we were building Health Crumbs, because a lot of these adventures that we go on allow us to bring it back to clients. And so we've been working with AARP for quite a long time. I built AARP Health in collaboration with AARP, and we experimented with a lot of these original ideas and how in the 50 plus, or AARP talks about, you know, their audience being 50 plus. I have to say I'm 53. I don't really feel like I'm part of the audience, but it's probably more like 65 plus. But what would work in that? Now you have a very interesting design constraint, ideas that we were already working on, things we went in the field, we went back, spent a lot of time with this new bracket group, and said what might work in that world. We developed some prototypes. We built it into an environment where we found that people were really interested in sharing their stories. Stories are such a powerful part of all of us and how we convey information. And actually, I'm going to go back one. I jumped ahead. And in this world, people could actually tell their stories and share their stories and then start to build back into a modification to our Health Crumbs idea. So we did that. I'm going to tell you about one more example of how the process I described to you and the learnings we achieved in the just living in people's homes and observing and listening closely. We call this Caress. It's a prototype still. It's ahead of its pure technological capability, but not by much. The technology does exist, but not quite in this form yet. But it's codenamed Caress, and it really is about thinking about the process of blood glucose testing differently. We watch people, sort of the whole process of testing, and we saw some really cool devices yesterday, including ones that are quite hidden and very powerful and mobile and just really great stuff. But a lot of that has to do with not only, you know, utility and accessibility, but also privacy. And privacy is a really important part of healthcare. But we were curious in the home with your trusted, you know, people around you, how much dialogue there is about what is your blood sugar level, Dad or Mom? What, you know, where are you at today? How are you this morning? And generally it is supportive and cool and positive. We thought, what if actually this could be a social activity? And you could sort of go from being the person with the disease to be a continuum of challenge that we all have. I mean, imagine if we actually got blood sugar or various vital signs feedback. This thing about, I saw the stuff I saw yesterday from the Qualcomm piece was so cool because, even whether it's as an athlete or as a patient or as a human, like just these feedback mechanisms, like, wow, I better slow down. I'm going up those stairs a little faster. I've had one too many cups of coffee. I get that feedback in time instead of like getting all jittery. This is the idea of a device with a technology, and it does exist. It's not available in this form yet, but that can actually read blood glucose through your skin. And what if we created a sort of a sculptural element that could live in the home, and you could put your hand on it, and it would know who you are, because it's a fingerprint, basically. It reads your vein structure and so on. And it knows who you are. So hi Scott. Here's your blood sugar right now. It gives you a very simple, visible feedback, green, yellow, red, something like that. And anybody can do it, as long as they're sort of logged into the interface. Do it a little bit later, put my hand in there. Hi Scott, I'm kind of on the border here. Pay attention to what you're doing. You don't need to take evasive action yet, but something to take note of. Or, hey Scott, time to really take note, to sort of get active with whatever your intervention is. That, whether, that would be, really useful just individually in certain environments, but not unique enough to become a product on its own. What we were interested about is the social dimensions of this sharing. So I don't want to have to, none of us want to be on the other side of the line of being kind of branded with something. Like, you're diabetic and I'm not. There's this continuum. We're really interested in that place. So in the home, we saw people saying, okay, yeah, I'm the diabetic and this is good and here's some ways that we can all support each other. But, Mom, why don't you try it? Susan, why don't you try it? What happens? What happens when I drink some juice, wait a little while, try it again? Wow, Susan's not a diabetic, but wow, look at that. That's a meaningful spike for Susan and her vital signs that's very simply put into an interface. So how does that start to become a kind of a coaching tool in a world that isn't so much black and white of diabetic or not, but sort of a range of things, and coincidentally occur in families and occur with diet and occur with behavior and the people around you. So how could this actually be a tool? Now, as we learned yesterday, this tool also, however it's shaped, whatever form it comes in, is wireless, and it pushes out to a gateway, and it can push up to a cloud, and it can be a source of information that gives me readback, vital signs, can be shared through my controls to a caregiver, to a physician, and so on. Yes, I know there's all kinds of systems that don't talk to each other yet, but we're going to get to that. We're going to get there. But even if it doesn't, just the power of this. And then when you do need that out and about privacy, what's my blood sugar right now? This same technology could be built into a tool that we move around. And this piece of it is available and capable of the fact that you can read on a flat surface. It's the curved surface and the shapeability of the technology. But here you actually have your iPhone app with a shell. A lot of us have these shells over our iPhones. But it works on the back, and it reads out, and it can give you this feedback into an interface, same interface, wherever I am, data, up to the cloud. I can get back to it. Long story short, it's a swirling, messy journey. These are two projects that we developed internally based on our scanning and our listening. I've given you an example of how we took some of the insights to a specific client. But this is kind of what we do, and it doesn't just sit with a client says, we need to solve this problem, and we do that every day. But also thinking about the learnings and how it goes back in, swirls back around in this learning process, the innovation process. In conclusion, it's really about the person, inside the patient, inside of personalized medicine. And the last thing, I love some of the speakers were talking about their mentors and influences, and I thought, this is what I'm reading right now, or have been reading for a while, and this is a little bit of an example of, well, it's not academic in any pure sense. It's really good rolling up of information, and this is one of the ways in which me, along the stream of information, all the way to the 1-minute manager or the 1-minute apology, achieve our information. So this is also an important piece of that. So that is what I wanted to share with you today. Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Do we have any questions? Okay, what I'd like people to do is come down to the mics. I'm going to put this mic, rather than us handing it around, we're going to put this mic on the stand.
Hi, very, very interesting. Is this on? Yeah. So I wanted to pick your brain on how to correct misinformation in the web. One example for vaccination and autism, right? So you have 1 or 2 Hollywood celebrities having a lot of traction, 6 independent parents of scientists basically not being heard.
Yes.
I was very intrigued by the fact that you said the pharmacist, for example, seem to be a trusted person. So how do these scientists who have done these epidemiological studies showing that the different components of the vaccines are not associated to autism, they're publishing this in a peer-reviewed journal that you had to pay to read. How do we get that message across? What would be the entry point?
Well, I'm just going to take a stab at it because, as I say, it's a long, swirling journey, but a really interesting question. And what comes to mind as you describe it is, I think about, and you said it in your own way, these giant chasms between complexity, like here I am at this conference, trying to drink and hold on and learn everything I can. But there's a long, long tail of way to the card, the health crumb. And I think that partly we're all guilty of this, which is, we write it off, or it's not what we do, or it's too hard, or, Larry sent around a note to us asking us to use accessible slides and accessible words. I thought that was cool. When I heard that, I was thinking of health crumbs. Like, where are we on that road? But I think it is, you came up to the mic and asked the question. It's sort of stepping out there. It's finding the avenue of, the food revolution is an example that comes to mind, which is, it went from us versus them, and then comes Jamie Oliver, and he starts telling this very crazy, charismatic story, and he really took the tiger by the tail. I just admire the fact that he took on that extremely messy and scary thing. But it's really to be able to take the expertise that you have and find the avenues, even if it's just like a community, a physical community, not just a virtual community. We all like to jump up to a Facebook or something, but a physical community where things get shared. And I don't have an easy answer, but this is a long, long, long tail. And the people that it really matters to, they're going to get influenced by a Hollywood celebrity, in Us magazine, on some talk show, and boom, all your hard work is out the window. And it's just plain frustrating, right? You see public health lost in the process. I heard several examples of that yesterday. So it's really maybe a part of my role, not just my role, all of our role, but part of maybe what brings me as a filmmaker into this world is that I see the need for this translation without distortion. So, is that?
So which agencies out there are trusted by the public? If a government panel advised to stop aggressive screening, and people went nuts. So government is not trusted.
Yeah.
Physicians are not trusted. So how can we scientists? Where do we have to go to? Which people can communicate our messages?
Well, don't say you can't, first of all, because just like inside of a patient's a person, inside of a scientist is a person and a community member, an individual. So I think that sort of the going to the existing authorities, the teacher, the government, the doctor, the system, has been breaking down. The beauty of that, although it's super messy, and I know a lot of you can articulate the messiness and scariness of this, but the beauty of it is there are alternatives that are starting to come out. They're all over, they're little things, right? But how the health crumb-like pieces, how we cobble together our source of truth, there's opportunities in that to insert good, vetted, informed truth, but in a form that someone can consume.
I really liked your talk. I'm curious how you'd apply it to a particular problem that we heard a lot about yesterday. We talked a lot about the burden of chronic illness, about individual accountability, and really I think one of the central problems is sort of individual stick-to-itiveness. My diabetes isn't going to go away. It's not the blood sugar today, it's the blood sugar over the long haul. How do you get at this where, I mean, it would seem that this would be a very useful tool to actually manage something over a long haul, not just for the 1 minute fix that you referred to.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. I will say that I'm just, the question is, what I really heard was at the center of it was, how does one go from these 1 minute fixes to the long journey of compliance, in the case particularly with blood sugar monitoring, but anything. You know, it was amazing listening to David Snow's talk about in all of these critical cases that are well known, like your question about, you know, the science of it, that all these things, people aren't making it to 12 months. And the tipping point is in that range of 9 to 12 months. And what, you know, like you said, what's the point? I mean, you're actually like, you're getting all this downside and none of the upside. So it's something I think about all the time. And there's not if there were an easy answer, you know, we'd be doing it. But that was part of, that's part of what I think about, which is, what is it really like for us, for real people? Like, well, that's where Health Crumbs, or the Caress idea, which is, well, and I think the centerpiece of Caress is not so much it's another device that does something and I can travel around with it, and that's great. There's a lot of those, but all those tipping thing upside down into a very non-intuitive place, which is, how does that thing I have to do all the time become a social thing that I share with people? How does it become something that is kind of interesting, and you have it too, just not as far out there, right? This sort of, what is it called, metabolic syndrome, you know, sort of that continuum. So how does, you know, and so that's just what we work on, and I don't have a quick answer for you, but I think it's really about making it not this side or that side of a line, but sort of looking at how do we start to smooth and make the connection. The very fact that I was invited here, I think, is about this idea of the boundaries are not science and else, but it's a whole process of how we have a dialogue and work together through that. So I could talk to you more, you know, offline about some ideas, but yeah, please.
As a physician, I'd like to say how good it was to see your first slide, showing what the patient wants.
Oh, thank you.
My questions to you are two. In order to achieve that, I wonder what your views are on how we need to change medical education, and secondly, on how we need to deal with the systems that are currently in place to deal with the care of patients and the payment for patient care.
Wow. Well, I really appreciate your asking the question, and yeah, just it's huge. And but I will. My one answer that comes to mind is I can't talk about, you know, the patient doctors, people here. In fact, Dr. Roseman, who will be speaking later, will have some really great insights about that, and education. But the pressures, the things that I think about in particular are the pressures that downstream the socialization that we as patients already have anticipate in our interaction with you as a physician, which is, I know I'm not going to have any time with you, and I know you're busy, and I know you have 30 people before me, and all that stuff. All that stuff I've preloaded. In fact, I'm not even sure if this is bad enough to come and see you with, or to get through all of these hurdles to bother you, the system, with, right? Those are the sort of, you know, just the things I hear, which is, or, you know, can I afford it? Am I covered? Is it going to be paid for? Or even another dimension is, you know, I have this strange little mark on my face that, you know, bleeds once in a while, but I'll just put some cream over it I don't want to deal with it, because I don't really want to know what it is, in a way, right? And I don't want to have an interaction with my physician in 3 minutes that says, God forbid, you have cancer, and then what? So there's all these kind of dimensions to that place, and I can't answer all that stuff, but that's what I listen for, and then I try to find applications. So thank you for the question.
So we have time for 2 more questions.
Okay. Yes.
Yes, hello? You have shown that most of the materials are at 10th grade level and most of the patients are at
Lower.
8th grade level. And yet when you shown the card and then you went to the social network, which is even more confused, wouldn't it be better with all of the data that you have is with the patients filling out all the information is to actually have a very simple customized card
Yes.
at the end of the visit
Yes.
with the doctor's input to saying, this is what you do.
Yeah, it would be,
It would
yeah.
seem, rather than going out to the whole universe and get the whole support group, it would probably be more confusing. And this is my thing.
I really like where that's coming from. The design constraint that may or may not be there, but that I perceive, is I can't get that system to do that as potentially effectively as I can try to sort through the readily available expert material and hopefully the vetting of the crowd. Not only, it's messy, it's still a work in progress, but that I can raise my hand and say, I've just been diagnosed with this thing that I can't pronounce. Does anybody else have that experience? There's people who've been there before me, patients like me, and then instead of sort of everybody typing me stuff or loading on all these articles of what people do, which is wonderful, but is that the sort of the card set, the virtual card set has been vetted, like a Wikipedia in a way, but with an expert structure that has been vetted and says, this is the latest, as of like yesterday, information with the latest New England Journal Study of Medicine linked into that, and that is fresh from this world. Now, but I would love it if we could do that, what you described. But one of the things I come up against is that whatever, people said it before, but we can't do that. Who's going to pay for it? HIPAA won't allow it. Blah, 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 all that stuff. So, and the physician.
I was just thinking, taking the patient's own information, the doctor's
Yeah.
observation, the lab test,
Yeah.
forget about the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And just give that person that.
I would love to have that. And when I went to Mayo Clinic recently, I got that, right? I got that. But it doesn't always happen. It's very rare. But, well, let's all work on making that happen. The vision is very good, very powerful. Thank you.
I was just wondering if you can talk about accessibility and when you and your team are coming up with these creative solutions. And I'm thinking more sort of socioeconomic,
Yes.
because
Yeah.
I wonder how you can implement or even work on developing all of these technologies without it becoming somewhat classist or elitist, because not everyone has an iPhone or not everyone has the economics to be able to afford some of those gadgets in their home.
No, it's perfect. It's a fantastic question, and who has access to what and where, and it's great. I would say, I can share with you if you want to talk later, but there's some beautiful examples. Colleagues at IDEO have done one of the things I'm really impressed with is they took the problem of immunization and took away technology. We're not going to have technology, we're not going to have electricity, we're not going to have all these things. We're just going to have this thing that's like a Band-Aid. Have anybody seen this? It's used for immunization in Africa and Haiti, places. You put it on, and when you pull the tab out, it scratches the skin and immunizes you. It's a very, very interesting device. You can, I'll look it up for you if you want to come find me, or you can just search for it, IDEO, immunization patch. But there's things like that, and I love those things. I mean, it's a great design constraint. It's a beautiful insight. But this IDEO example just comes to mind, which is how do you solve immunizing millions of people with no technology? And it was a very low-cost device, and you put it on like a Band-Aid, pull it out, immunized. So.
Great. Thank you very much, Scott. That was terrific.